Hello everybody, my name is Average Election Enjoyer. Today is December 11th of 2025 and I am going to be going over the December 9th special elections that we saw in Florida, Iowa, and Georgia. There were some other smaller elections, but those were mainly primaries and whatnot, so I'm going to be covering uh, the main six races that we're going to be looking at on December 9th. And the first of these is in the Miami mayoral runoff election, as there were candidates previously eliminated in the previous ballot. So this was an election between Eileen Higgins and Emilio Gonzalez, a registered Democrat versus a registered Republican, in a technically independent, nonpartisan election. However, Republicans such as Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis flew their support behind Emiliano Gonzalez, while Eileen Higgins also enjoyed similar support from prominent Democratic figures. And another thing to note is that this has been an election that has been dominated by Republicans for the last a lot of cycles. So it's been about 15 years, 16 years since a Democrat has been in office. Technically, it was an independent, but he ran as an independent, but was a Democrat and returned to being a Democrat as soon as he left. I'm talking the past mayor back 16 years ago or so, who was Democratic. So it's been a long time since Miami has had a Democratic mayor. And so you see a huge result from Eileen Higgins here, 59.5 to 40.5, a 19-point margin for the Democrat here. Again, nonpartisan race technically, but it was a endorsed Republican versus an endorsed Republican versus an endorsed Democrat in this race, and ended up being a 19-point margin. After this result, a lot of people are talking about, is Florida going to be close once again? Their evidence behind that is that if you look at the data in this election, you'll see that there were a lot of independents. Pretty much every independent swung towards the Democrats, and it even showed that Republicans lost some voters. Republicans voted for the Democrats in this election, which is, of course, very bad signs for the Republicans in this state, which has only recently become a safe state for the Republicans. As you can see in past elections, Francis Suarez used to be the governor. He's a Republican. Again, won in 2017 and 2021. In 2013, Thomas Regalado, also a Republican, registered Republican. Manny Diaz, this was who I was referring to, a member of, he's the chair of the Florida Democratic Party there. So he was the Democratic mayor I was speaking of. He served 2 terms and then back to Republicans for a very long time past that. About 30 years since you've had a really registered Democrat who wasn't, as I said, there's a Democrat who won way back in the early 2000s, but he technically became independent for that election. So it's been a little bit. So this is a big flip for the Democrats, big city, showing how the Democrats continue to really thump the Republicans in the cities in these special elections, showing how cities are really swinging towards the Democrats. Bad news for any Republicans in states that have large cities, close swing states. Pretty much every swing state has large cities in them that if they really start churning out, it's going to make winning elections a problem for the Republicans here, and that is again what we saw in Miami. The next election, of course, there's an Albuquerque mayor runoff, but I'm not going to be talking about that. State legislative election in Florida Senate District 11. Here we see that Ralph Masulo Jr. beat Ash Marwa 49.2 to 40.8. And this looks like a good victory for Republicans, 18.6 point margin here in this election. However, if we go to some of the past elections here, in 2025, as you can see, that was the result, 59 to 40. In 2024, it was a 70-30 point margin for the Republican. As you can see, turnout was much different in this election here, 300,000 to just 82,000 here. But again, that's the theme in these special elections, other than the one in Tennessee, which had midterm level turnout, which is a very bad sign for the Republicans, as it is. In 2024, as you can see, Republicans won 70 to 30. If we go back to 2020, there wasn't even a proper Democratic candidate. Democrats didn't even run a candidate. This is a Green Party candidate, I believe, losing 75 to 25. And in 2020, this was before the Democrat won, but this was before redistricting. So Republicans winning 50 points, 40 points, all the way down to 18 points in the most recent election. That is a 22-point swing from 2024, just a year's time. Even though, as you can see, a lot less turnout. Those big of swings usually indicate some sort of persuasion in this district. This is another election that has people excited about the possibilities of Florida, or at least Democrats excited about the possibility of Florida in future elections. I'm more skeptical. I want to see some more results before I'm willing to sort of say that Florida is going to be competitive for the future. However, these are definitely stronger indicators than what we've seen in the past, where we've seen Republicans totally dominate. And in Florida House District 90, we see Rob Long defeating Maria Zack and Karen who's an independent. Rob Long defeating Maria Zack, and then Karen being an independent. Rob Long, the Democrat, no flips in any of these elections. The big flip in Georgia will be, in fact, coming later. This solid victory for the Democrat here, winning by about 28 points here in this election. If we go to some of the past elections from District 90, which is what we see here. If we go to, of course, 2025, this is the result we were talking about. Again, low turnout election, remember that. So these can't exactly be correlated 2026. However, if you consistently see strong results for for Democrats or Republicans in special elections, that usually indicates good performances in the upcoming midterms. And in 2024, Democrats only won by 13 points. This is a huge overperformance. Again, just like in the last one, which went from 40 points for Republicans to just 18 points for Republicans, this goes from 13 points Democrats all the way up to 28 points Democrats. That is times two overperformance. The Democrats overperformed by twice as many points as they did in 2024 to 2025. We go back to 2022. It was within a single-digit margin. And as you can see, again, note the turnout per amounts here. But again, the Republicans did better in this lower turnout election than they did in the actual election here. That showed how Republicans used to, in 2022, which was supposed to be a Republican wave year, or a lot of people thought so, Republicans were doing fairly well in these special elections here. And they ended up winning the Senate. So they did, even though they had kind of a disaster in the House of Representatives, and they won the House of Representatives. They did not win the Senate. They lost the Senate, which was, sort of seen as a disaster. However, Republicans still had a fairly decent year in 2022, where I'm fairly certain they won the popular vote. I'd have to fact check on that. All I know, the popular vote was very close in that election. Republicans did very well, and it was a 9-point margin. And then we go up to 2025, a special election. It's a huge margin for the Democrats. That is, again, a good sign for Democrats. We're seeing these consistent overperformances across in all three of these elections, and it is going to keep going. As we go to the Georgia State House 23 special election, Billy Fincher got first with 27% of the vote. Scott Sanders 26% of the vote. Bryce Fudge. This is going to be a runoff. So Democrats managed to get themselves into the position of a runoff. Don't expect Democrats to win this election, not even close. This is a fairly red Republican district here, as you can see. If we just zoom out, you can see it's pretty far off from the outskirts of Atlanta, fairly rural area here. That votes pretty consistently Republican here. So a Democrat and a Republican both qualifying for the runoff election. And then we could see in 2024 it was uncontested. There were no Democrats who ran in this election. In 2022, again, uncontested in this election. So any performance by the Democrat is technically an overperformance, but if you can see Democrats getting 35% of the vote, that would be a fairly good result in an election like this in a very red area, especially because most of the Democrats' overperformances have been seen in cities and in the suburbs. So seeing them overperform in even more rural areas would be a big boost and a big confidence booster for Democrats, especially in a state like Georgia, where we're going to talk about the biggest surprise of the night, where we go to Georgia State House 121 special election, where Eric Gissler would win 50.9 to Mac Guest 49.2 in a huge flip for the Democrats. This has been a consistently Republican seat. See, in 2024, it ended 61 to 38.9. A huge margin for the Republicans there. That is a 23-point margin of victory, about 23-point margin of victory for the Republicans in 2024. In 2022, again, Republicans won by 20 points. So in midterms, get 26,000 votes. Republicans win by 20 points. And then in 2024, Republicans win with 32,000. So a similar, an increase of votes here, 6,000 more votes. In an election year, Republicans win by 20. We go to the special election where a Democrat comes out on top with another about 23 point over-performance, winning by 1.8 points, a very sizable, honestly. You normally wouldn't hear 1.8 points as a large victory, but in the case of this election, where it was a 23 point where it was over 20 point victory for the Republican, almost less than a year ago. A little bit more than a year ago, November to December. A little bit more than a year ago, you see a Democrat winning this very Republican seat in the state of Georgia, which is a huge concern for the Republicans, because in 2026, they have an upcoming Senate race. Jon Ossoff is going to be running to try to defend his Senate seat, and that is going to be a must-win race for the Republicans if they want to put the Senate out of Democratic hands for the foreseeable future. They need to win that election. However, we've seen a lot of races in Georgia show considerable swings to the Democrats. It's making the likelihood of defeating Jon Ossoff look less and less with each special election that we have seen here. And that is a concern for the Republicans and a triumph for the Democrats here. Especially with Georgia being a swing state, every state, a House or House of Representative member, every state senator makes a huge difference in the redistricting battles that we see going on. A lot of people, I like covering these special elections because a lot of time they go into state politics, and people don't realize how important state politics is. This whole redistricting war is going on through mostly you saw Prop 50 from California. That was voters who voted on it. However, it was still pushed through the Assembly and the Senate here in California, and in other states, Texas, they were able to push their math through just their state Congress. Missouri, similar situation. So you see that for a lot of other Republican states that have gerrymandered. Ohio, they pushed it through their legislators. So this legislative control allows them to push it through. And in Virginia, for the Democrats, they're either going to do a proposition which is going to go through their state Congress, or they're going to push it through their state Congress as just a bill they're going to put through the Congress. And that just shows how important these state politics are. They're the ones who are making a huge impact on the actual voters' lives. That's why these special elections for Georgia House of Representatives District 121 might not captivate the interest of a more national favored voter or person who cares more about national politics. But these are important elections because they set the groundwork for what you might see in national politics. So huge win for the Democrats in this election to secure another Democratic vote in their in Georgia's House of Representatives here in that occurred on December 9th. And then the final election I'm going to go over is going to be Iowa State House 7 special election general, where we see Wendy Larson, the Republican, win 70 to just about 30 over Rachel Burns, a 40-point win from the Republicans here. We go to 2025, of course, you see 70 to 30. 2024, you see an independent only getting 16% of the vote. In 2022, you see it was uncontested. So these are all write-in votes here. And in 2020 was redistrict. So as you can see, while it's not nearly that close in an election, it is showing how Democrats are continuing to dominate in these special elections, doubling their support. Because the independent candidate, I'm sure, is who most of the Democrats voted for in this very low turnout election. Democrats were able to get 30% of the vote, up from only 16%. That's almost a doubling of support in a somewhat rural Iowa district. And so, as you could see across all of these elections, you saw Democratic overperformances continue, and especially in this election, a 23-point flip from a seat that was winning, that was 20-plus point win for the Republicans, a Democrat ended up winning just over a year later. That is a huge overperformance. And in Miami, Democrats ending a long reign of the Republicans, even though it's a nonpartisan race. It was, as I said, both candidates were endorsed by their respective parties, and a big win for the Democrats, a 19-point win over the Republican in this election. And we saw consistent Democratic overperformances in all of these other local, or not local, but state House and state Senate elections. So a great night for the Democrats once again, a very, very poor night for the Republicans once again. Again, I keep saying that these races need to be wake-up calls for the Republicans, or they are going to have a disastrous 2026. It is obvious that their policies are not that popular at the moment. You could say that these are, you can make arguments. Miami is a city, should be a Democrat. Democrats should win there anyways. But what are you going to say about the Georgia? What are you going to say about this Georgia seat? There is no way that if the Republicans were doing well, Eric Gissler would have won this election. If Republicans were doing well, he would have lost by 30 or 20 or a normal margin. He would have lost by a fair bit, but instead he won. That is just a huge overperformance for the Democrats in a swing state that Republicans must win if they want to maintain dominance in the Senate. So this is a real disaster from the Republicans. Same with the Miami election. Same with this one, where the Democrat got to 40% in an election that they had no business getting this margin in. This is just a bad night overall for the Republicans, in a series of bad nights for the Republicans in terms of electoral politics. And if the Republicans want to do well in 2026 and they want to do well in some of these special elections, I already explained why these special elections are so important, even in the state congresses. It's because they, are going to allow the agendas of some of national leaders to get carried out. That's why you need your state legislators, because in Indiana they didn't have enough support from their Republican members of Congress, because some of them are maybe more moderate, have reservations, and those are going to be in swing districts. Maybe some of the MAGA members of the Republicans are going to lose. And if they do, then they'll lose even more support, and it'll become even less likely that they'll be able to redistrict. That's why these races are so important. That's what happened in Indiana with more moderate Republicans saying they're not going to go for it. Same with Kansas. Same with Vermont. You see these... Sorry, not Vermont. Same with New Hampshire. You see that happening in all of these state houses. You see these battles happening, and that is why these elections are so important, and Democrats are dominating them. Like in Virginia. If you didn't know, in Virginia, the Democrats went from, it was like 49 to 51 for their state legislature. Now it's like 63 to 47. It's 64, 36, something like that. Now the Democrats are going to be able to put whatever map they want through the legislature, and Republicans can do nothing about it. So these are important elections that are going to have an impact on this redistricting fight and other fights of something that might happen in the future that is similar. And that's why these are huge victories for the Democrats, and along with showing how the Democrats are doing very well right now in increasing momentum and getting people more excited to vote, and Republicans are losing hope on the ballot. That is why these elections are so important for the Democrats, and that's why the Republicans should be concerned by losing in these elections. That is this is another bad night to finish a bad year for the Republican Party, and if they want to do well in 2026, they need to wake up. And if Democrats want to do well in 2026, they need to keep pushing forward by winning these special elections and keeping the momentum going. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.